The game I'm about to review is about werewolves. This review will contain mild spoilers. I will do my best to keep it vague, but I will have to reveal a few things to talk about them, though they may already be obvious. The following is all personal opinion and speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. Everyone's experience will be different. Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest, is a visual novel adventure based on the legendary tabletop role-playing game Werewolf the Apocalypse. It is the first video game adaptation to come from this 1992 RPG classic, and my god, I hope it isn't the last. Heart of the Forest is based in the world of darkness, where werewolves, vampires, and monsters are real and they live among us. It has a story built in a world just on the edge of reality, where the what-ifs and maybes seem like a possibility. This leads to an immersion unlike any other because you find yourself asking those questions. What if this could actually happen? Or maybe I've been thinking about this wrong. Heart of the Forest lands smack middle in this edge of reality setting, my absolute personal favorite storytelling technique. Even if you know nothing about the World of Darkness universe as I did going into this, Heart of the Forest is told from the perspective of an outsider who's gently, well maybe not gently, introduced into it. The game is a horror after all. I had a few small issues with the game, which I will get into later, but overall I really enjoyed my experience and would absolutely recommend this game to anyone who has an affinity for werewolves or likes horror games. Heart of the Forest takes place in the small Polish town of Białowieża, bordering one of the last primeval forests in Europe known as the Puszta, Białowieska, or the Puszta. The plot is loosely based on the 2016 protests in the area where deforestation and logging of the Puszta enraged environmentalists and activists before it was finally stopped by the European Court of Justice a year later in 2017. You play as Maya, a young American woman with Polish ancestry, haunted by strange dreams and a mysterious paternal lineage. Women and werewolves are something rarely seen in media, especially as main characters, and I appreciated this diverse decision by the developers. Your adventure to Białowieża in search of answers about Maya's character takes you deep into this conflict. How you deal with it is completely up to you. Maya's personality, goals, and narrative are all based on your choices. Heart of the Forest is an open book, and you're holding the pen. There are more ways than one to solve conflicts and many friends to make, or not, along the way. Now, this game is the first of hopefully many that will fill a genre void where dusty copies of Skyrim sit with the edge of their game case in werewolves. More specifically, playing as a werewolf. As in you, the player, get to play a werewolf. I don't know why, but this has been such an ignored genre for so long. I can't tell you how many moons I've been craving quality games, media, stories, anything that tickles my werewolf fancy, and something finally exists to do just that, fully realized and with a bite. In traditional visual novel style, there is a lot of text. It is a novel after all. It scrolls down on the left side of the screen at a fair pace, using audio and visual effects to emphasize what the text is saying. The layout overall is nice. Well balanced with a color palette that's easy on the eyes and striking artwork that changes and adapts based on who you are as a character. There are mouse over clues in the text, most of the time, but I will touch on this in a bit. If you aren't sure what a lore, word, or phrase means, this upped the accessibility factor for someone who was new to the World of Darkness universe, like I was going into this. Unlike many other visual novel style games, however, Heart of the Forest has a referenceable character sheet in the top right of the screen at all times. You were able to track Maya's friendship statuses with other characters, track goals and objectives, and gain general information about the character you were playing. It didn't feel totally necessary, but it was well enough thought out and a nice to have thing. I found myself getting sucked right into the narrative. I played through this visual novel 3 separate times with the goal of playing 3 completely different characters, and I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't encounter enough recycled text to break the immersion. Each pathway was unique enough that every subsequent playthrough after the first still felt fresh and fun. While major story events still happened in the same places, the paths between events varied greatly. Depending on the choices you make and how you play as Maya, different scenes and scenarios will happen each time. My first playthrough, I felt myself making decisions like I would if I were the one thrust into the Puszta. However, this led to a pretty bland story without much conflict. Really says a lot about me as a person. In a horror werewolf game where you're an 8-foot tall killing machine with claws and teeth, this led to a feeling of disappointment. If If you're a bland person like me, you may want to play a character and have fun with it. The story kept with its edge of reality theme through and through. Its progression was steady, consistent, and felt natural as a player immersed in the world. It delivered suspenseful moments where, just like you might in real life, you start to second guess some of your decisions. The build-up to the climax of the story was executed in a way that you were guaranteed a spike in adrenaline. I got the rush in every playthrough, not just the first one. Very well done. Art and ambience were the cherries on top, adding to the story and making spooky moments even spookier and the forest feel totally alive. I really liked how certain sound effects were used in tandem with the text to create emphasis for important moments. A very powerful tool in terms of immersion. Overall, the writing was well done. Friendships with other characters felt natural and not forced, dialogue was realistic and flowed well between the characters, and there were no spelling or grammatical errors found. It felt like I was actively building friendships when I wanted to. I cared that they were safe. I worried when they had their own conflicts, and I felt they had their own motivations and mysteries. There were characters identifying all across the LGBTQ spectrum, which of course I can appreciate, and it didn't feel forced or out of place. They felt just like people, and I can tell it's exactly what the writers were going for. Of course, I personally would have preferred to play as a male character, and I think that would have aided in me feeling more connected to the whole narrative, but even still, I didn't feel it took away from my experience or immersion in the game. Due to the RPG elements built into this visual novel, your choices and actions have consequences, some good and some bad. I really appreciated the feeling of making a good call and having one of my stat points increase. Inversely, making a bad decision had a weight behind it, and if the consequences weren't immediately felt, they'd come back to bite me later. Now that we have an understanding of what this game is and some of the aspects I really liked, I'll let you know what I didn't like and where the game just fell a bit short for me. While I absolutely enjoyed the overall story of Heart of the Forest as a whole, I noticed some weird pacing issues with the plot. The first 50% of the game, it is tracked on the pause menu, felt ultra fleshed out. You can tell the writers had all the time they needed to make the story what they wanted, and things felt really well balanced. At no point was my immersion broken due to feeling like I missed something. Unfortunately, the second half of the game almost felt rushed. No dip in the quality of the writing itself, but I felt like there was a deadline to be met and the writers weren't given enough time to polish the story to a degree like they had with the first half. While doing my first playthrough, I felt that the latter half of the story just wasn't as complete. Certain narrative sections were glossed over instead of explored, and the story felt like it came to a forced ending. I know there are many choices and many different endings to explore, but no matter which path I walked or which ending I got, I felt the story ended too soon. Of course I wanted to keep playing, and therefore would want more story, but I felt like the story was cut short, as in, we have a deadline to finish. Finish it up, writers, and they were left to wrap up the pieces as best they could. It didn't feel like it ended as naturally as I would have liked to have seen after such an amazing experience in the first half of the game. I felt the rising actions placed throughout the plot led to Maya's transformation being the climax of the story, and while it was in a sense, everything after felt like it had lost the driving force behind its direction. Saving the Pushta was intended to be the main conflict in the story, but I think it was overshadowed by Maya's own conflict with herself. This, unfortunately, made the whole deforestation plotline seem less important overall. Again, well written, but instead of having a solid backbone of plot and a driving story force like the first half, we were now just coasting. Overall though, the good vastly outweighs the bad for Heart of the Forest. That I can say with confidence. To summarize, the first half was laser focused with great pacing, but the second half felt meandering and rushed. Overall, the writing kept its top-notch standards of quality, but it almost felt like the writers didn't have enough time to finish the narrative in the way they wanted to. The character sheet is a super neat idea, being able to track stats, objectives, and friendships. However, as soon as I had filled out my character sheet, the story was wrapping itself up. It felt redundant in the sense that now I have my fully fleshed out character with alignment set and aspects chosen, only for the story to end shortly after. I wanted to play the character that I just spent the entire story building, to see how decisions I'd made would play out, and I felt I just didn't really get a chance. To wrap this all up, I very much enjoyed Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest. It was well written, with subject matter I've craved for a very long time, delivered in a high quality and immersive package. I enjoyed going through the story multiple times to see how different decisions I made would play out, and I appreciated the different endings based on what kind of character you played. I felt let down by the latter half of the story due to it feeling rushed and out the door, but overall, 100% I would recommend Heart of the Forest. If you're like me and crave an immersive werewolf experience, or even just want something to cut your teeth on the World of Darkness universe, you should absolutely pick up this game. I'm extremely excited to see what comes next. I'm Skuru, and thank you for watching.